Today's review is of Where You Are Is Not Who You Are by former Xerox CEO Ursula Burns. Darren Walker, president of the Ford Foundation, notes, "Often when we think of big business, we think of money, power, and product. But when Ursula Burns speaks of the corporate world, she celebrates and brings to light the people, the human component that makes all things possible. This book is a wonderful tribute to the American worker." Our presenter today is Dr. Seven Yetelkin, Dean of the Simon Business School at the University of Rochester. A macroeconomics scholar, she is well known for her research in sustainable monetary and fiscal policies in environments where policymakers and the public have informational asymmetry. Please join me in welcoming the Dean to our podium.
I'm allowed to take my mask off. Thank you for that warm welcome, and I am delighted to be here. Let me see if I can find my little clicker over here. My name is Shivin Yatakin. I'm the Dean of Simon Business School, and I am really excited to talk about where you are is not who you are. When I was sent the book, a copy of the book, thank you very much, by the way, my complimentary copy, I read it like it was some sort of mystery novel in one sitting. And then I realized, wait a second, I have about a month to go before I do this presentation, and I better reread it again. But it was that exciting, that riveting, and that compelling. So there's a lot to say, and I know that we would like to open it up to discussion, so I don't want to be the usual professor who just speaks from the stage until everybody's eyes roll behind their back. I certainly want this to be as interactive as possible because I want to find out what you thought of the book. And there are many things to say, like I said, so I'm trying to just hit a few points from my point of view, what really resonated and what I thought about some of the content as well as the insights from the book. And let me know if I should move closer because of the streaming to the... Thank you very much. Sorry about that. So when I was asked to do this, I was very flattered, but at the same time, I did ask the question, why me? Honestly, I have not done a public or official book review since college. Now, I've worked as an associate editor for many economics journals, but that's a different kind of scholarly enterprise that you have a certain way of you assess scholarly books, and it's a different play. I only moved to Rochester about 15 months ago, and I really mean half, because half of my family, or at least the 3/4 of my family, is still in Pittsburgh trying to make the transition by the end of this year. This is my first time, and I am ashamed to admit it, and I will, inside the Rochester Public Library. It's beautiful, so I will try to do a quick tour before I rush back to my office, and I will certainly be back. I love libraries, and I should have been here a little bit earlier. And I'm not a corporate executive. I spent all of my career in higher education as a professor, and now, of course, also have administrative duties, and I'm not a black female executive either. But, when I read the book, and I started reading the book, and I thought, well, why not me, right? I'm the first female dean of the Simon Business School, so there's definitely, thank you. Like Ursula, and this really touched my heart, I'm a mathematician. I studied mathematics as an undergraduate. And I have been pretty much all my life in a heavily male-dominated field, that is economics and the business scholarly enterprise. I, too, have a very strong mother who taught me values and the power of education. My mother actually never made it beyond the first elementary school, beyond 5th grade, where she grew up. She was sent to learn things like sewing and cooking, but never really had a formal education beyond 5th grade. And here I was with a PhD and a dean of a business school, and maybe some of that journey, certainly not the same as Ursula's, but definitely resonated with me. I'm also an avid learner, worker, busy bee, taskmaster, cat herder, whatever you want to call me. And I, too, have been, and this is something that really comes across in her writing, have been a beneficiary of generosity of many people. And she talks about kind of the public programs that have helped her launch her educational endeavors. I too had an opportunity to get a scholarship and come to the United States as an undergraduate student. And that opened up doors that I never thought were possible. So, and I never fit the mold either. You know, I don't belong to clubs. I don't know how to play golf. I can't ski. I just don't do slippery sports, period. So a lot of times when I'm talking to alumni, whether here or somewhere else, and they want to, you know, they're very generous and they want to kind of say, hey, you know, maybe we can meet in the winter. Do you ski? I'm like, no, I'll just hold the bag, you know, at the end. I really don't know how to do any of that. So, but it was a pleasure to read this book. And as I was reading it, I was thinking, and this is where I would love to hear your views as well. I thought, is this a memoir? It is part memoir, because of course she's talking about the history, you know, the history of her career, her childhood, her educational endeavors, as well as what's happening with her family. She's talking about her own history. But it's also, what also resonated for me is that it was part leadership advice. And I do agree that it's about the human element. How much of that was really about the human element? And as I moved from being a professor, where I mostly interacted obviously with my colleagues and my students, onto administration, I learned that lesson very early on and very profoundly. And it was just really put under the spotlight during the pandemic, how important that human element is, who you work with, how you work with people, how you treat people, how you value them, and how you support them. And that really does ring true. And a big history of Xerox, right? Obviously, again, being new to the Rochester area, of course I know Xerox. Who doesn't? You know, you have to be living under a very pretty big rock, I think, not to know what Xerox and who Xerox was. But I didn't realize that the book was going to contain such a, you know, full history almost, at least for the time that she had been there, which is, you know, spanned many decades of the history of Xerox. So I learned a lot. I love books where I learn a lot. This was certainly a book where I learned a lot, and a lot of the pieces resonated with me. It's hard to miss that, right? Even in my sort of usual speed reading, binge reading mode, when I first got the book and sat in my favorite chair at home, I tripped up over that sentence. And I know that very well. This is not something new to me, that there are more CEOs named John than there are CEOs who are women. I think we're at an inflection point. I think companies, both because of the social justice issues that have definitely become more spotlighted after the summer of 2020 and the Me Too movement, there's much more of a spotlight on having the right gender, ethnic, racial, and background diversity in top administrative positions and top management positions. We're not there yet, nowhere near there yet. And a lot of times one does have to look at it with a skepticism that perhaps we're just boxes that are being checked. But it was really, what was really interesting to me is that her ascension to that role, the mentors she had had, the people that she had worked with, and how they had been part of this huge support system. It does take a village. It takes more than a village to make a CEO, whether you're a woman or a man. And as far as men are concerned, that support system maybe is a little easier to access, a little easier to tap into. It is more natural. It is bigger, certainly. As a woman, it's a lot harder. And especially in case of Ursula as a minority woman, it's certainly hard. But this is one of the things that really, really resonated with me. There's a lot more to be done. Everybody needs at least one break to cement a better future. What a good thing to say in a public library, right? Funded by, you know, generous donors and a lot of volunteer work. It does take one break. And this is related to the next thing that really resonated with me. Talent is evenly distributed. Opportunity is not. No matter where we are, whether we're in the Xerox CEO and boardroom, whether we're running a tiny nonprofit, whether we're in talent, whether we're in higher education. Really, we're all in the business of talent management. That's what we do. That's what I do day in and day out. You know, people ask me, what keeps you up at night? It's not the budget. It's about, are people happy working here? Am I going to lose really, really, skilled and wonderful workers? How am I going to be able to replace them? Those of you who are probably either doing this kind of work or seeing the wanted signs all around, even Rochester, and if you just travel, it's just the same across the nation, realize that we're now at a point where seeking talent, finding that talent, attracting that talent, nurturing that talent, and in my case, educating that talent, is really profoundly what we do day in and day out. And providing opportunities, whether that's to bring somebody into our midst, to be able to give them an educational opportunity, to give them a job opportunity, an internship opportunity. This is really where the heart, we can worry about, of course we have to worry about the bottom line. We do need to keep the lights on. We know how that's done, right? We do have to have the resources. But at the end of the day, what makes or breaks from the smallest to the biggest organization are the people in it. And that, again, is a lesson that is both a leadership and a humanity lesson that really comes across very strongly throughout the book. She's definitely a very, very important leader, not just in her job at Xerox, but many board positions that she has served, as well as all the work that she did under the Obama administration. And this really resounded with me. What is the role of a leader? Sometimes I get asked that question, and I ponder that question as well. As a leader of a business school, what is my role? Do I just sort of set strategies? Do I worry about the bottom line? Do I just tell, how to allocate resources? Yes, those are all part of my job. But it's really, this is an incredibly nice statement. The role of a leader is to define reality and give hope. And again, it's the human element in there, right? How do I bring people along with me? How do I set a goal, a hopeful goal, to be able to work towards together? And the humanity in her approach to leadership, and the humanity that is really, even in her background, from her mom to her siblings to the people that she has met along the way who've supported her, including her own family and her husband, is really just, palpable through the pages of the book. And that's a very important lesson to bring home. When you think about when she was really writing these pages, right? And even now, in the middle especially of a pandemic. But this is, again, a lesson that transcends the boardroom, transcends leadership at a corporation. It's what we tell our children. I have 2 teenage girls. It's how I approach raising them. It's how I approach my discussions, sometimes some of the hardest discussions with my staff and faculty and my students. There is no substitute for facts and truth. You want to bring people along. You can disagree. We can all disagree. We can, bat around ideas for many days. As a leader, one has to make the executive decision at some point based on all of that information and all of that feedback and move forward. But what really resonated with me, and again, this is her humane, human-centric approach to management. Talk to people. Present them with the facts. Present them with the truth. Tell them why you need to make the decisions you need to make, why you're approaching it the way you are. Let that information seep in. Let them sit on it for a little bit and come to an understanding why you need to make these decisions. And I think that is such an important important. It's not just about the scientific truths. It's about respecting, not managing people. It's about respecting people's intellect from the smallest children, from the smallest role in your organization to the biggest one. Because we all want to be respected. We all want to be talked to like we can understand the situation, we can assess the situation. There are many things we don't know about the workings of. I don't know what a manufacturing plant should look like. I certainly don't. A lot of us have our specialties and areas of our expertise. But what we do have is a human curiosity. And what we do have is the desire to be treated as a peer, even if our job titles and our qualifications may be very different. And this, again, is something that I thought was really, really important to, and of course, one can take this out into many different contexts, especially when we think about when she was writing this book, and you know, the distortion of the facts and the truths, and lots of misinformation. And there are bigger fights to fight, certainly, along that, but in our daily lives, just being honest with the people around us, giving them the information from what you're going to cook for dinner all the way to the big, maybe, you know, plant closing job that you need to, decision that you have to make. I think it's a very important lesson to learn. Who you are is not where you are. Obviously, that's the title of the book. And then she talks about that story. This is from her mom, right? Her mom living in the projects of New York, and with a very strong mother who supported their education and their opportunities and worked very hard to make sure that they had those opportunities. When you think about who you are is not where you are, that is absolutely true. And I'm sure that that resonates with many people, both in this audience as well as who are hopefully watching us online. We don't want to be bound by our circumstances, especially the circumstances that we are born into that we have no control over, right? We don't get to choose those circumstances. But I want to ask this question, and this is where I'm going to open it up to the discussion over here. Is it also the case that where you are is not who you are? Right? The entire book, as I said, is certainly a memoir, but it's also a history of Xerox, right? It's about somebody who dedicated almost all of their career to one particular institution and really committed to that institution. There are many things about that institution and organization to be really replicated. I love the fact that it was a relatively flat organization. There wasn't a lot of fanfare and pomp and circumstance, that people were put in very much as the, you know, the central piece of the organization. And there was a lot of values that one can look back and continue to look at and say that this is something that I would like to emulate in my organization. So is where we are who we are? Is Xerox what Ursula is? Is being the first female black CEO of a Fortune 500 company is who she is? She certainly pushes up against that, right? At the very beginning of the book as well. So it's always interesting, you know, what is our identity? I mean, it really begs that question. I know that it's about opportunity, and she ties it back to opportunity at the end of the book, about the opportunity of education, opportunity to be given to have some learning experiences, as she did within Xerox, opportunity to excel, opportunity to show one's abilities and hard work. But at the same time, you know, what is the line? And should there even be a line between, you know, our identity as a person and our work? We have a lot of discussions in our own school, in our own university, about the value of work. And when you read Ursula's book, she's a powerhouse. I mean, when I read it, I just thought, how is this woman still upright? Because it sounded like maybe she had about 72 hours a day, whereas the rest of us mortals had 24 hours. The amount of the variety of activities and the amount of work and activity that she could handle seemed almost sort of inhumane to me, how much she worked and how much she juggled. And she found a way. And she repeatedly says, I loved almost, quite cheeky, every minute of it. Does it define us? Is that what we take away from the book? And, you know, I grappled with that. That's why it's in red, because I'm going to do what professors do really well, which is just to hit the ball to your court and see what you think about it. So thank you.